Checco Varese is the cinematographer behind the new Amazon horror series Them. I'm Kevin Jacobson of Gold Derby. And so let's just start with what it was about Them that made you want to be a part of it in the beginning.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for the interview. When I read the script, one of the things that struck me the most important one was the fact that it is presented as a horror show because it has entities that come and sort of torture and live with the family of our heroes. But that wasn't the horror that scared me most. The horror that scared me most was the one that lived outside, the one that lived in the streets, the one that attacked them in the form of racism and lack of empathy and things that we see every day, you know. And that was the horror that attracted me more, which is probably more a drama than a horror. But again, that was the part that attracted me more, to be able to sort of portray that in a stylized and realistic way anyway.
So, what kind of conversations were you having with Little Marvin, the creator, or Nelson Craig, the director, about just establishing how the series overall should look?
Little Marvin had a very open mind yet specific idea. So he describes the series as a very classic 1950s movie, Hollywood movie, through the camera lens and grammar of a 1970s zoom and sort of realistic view, like All the President's Men and The French Connection, with the tricks of 1990s music videos and the lenses and sort of the weird framing, and the 21st century technology. So there you go, from the 50s to the 21st century. He wanted that kind of mix, that kind of vibe. And Nelson is a very savvy camera person. He used to be a very successful director of photography, and now it's a very successful director. And we had very specific conversations about, I think in this moment, the camera pushes in and sort of dodges to a side just to emphasize the uncertainty or the anguish that the characters live. So they were very vague, not vague, they were very broad strokes conversation, and at the same time, very specific conversation. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also a number of close-ups, not only when we're seeing the Emery family just being terrified or anxious or whatever they're feeling, but we're also seeing what they are scared of, in those extreme close-ups as well. Like I remember the man that Henry sees in the window at his work, or like the tap dance man just looking straight into the camera. Can you talk about choosing the right time to give us those big close-ups and when to step back more and give the audience more distance?
That it's always a dialogue that happens between the cinematographer and the director, or the operators and the director. Nelson was very specific, and other directors, we work with 6 directors, Ty West and many of them, and they all had their own sort of timing, because it's all about timing. It's horror is, I find that horror is like an algorithm, it repeats itself and it works, and it's very mathematical. It's instinctual, when you shoot a horror movie, say, please don't open the door, don't open the door. And the character opens the door and then nothing happens. And when the character turns, here it is, Tap Dance Man is behind him. Or not, that's the other scare, or not. So scares are a very specific way. But also when you emphasize, and even in a drama, when you emphasize a camera move, it's like the accent, or when you're a writer, there is the comma that leaves you time to breathe, or is the dot that leaves you time to breathe. Camera is like those elements in writing that let you breathe or emphasize something. So pushing in was, or the close up, or the non close up, that was came from blocking the scene. You see the scene, you understand the scene, and talking to the director. But that applies to every movie. Talking to the director, say, who's this scene is from? You know, who does the scene belongs to? Some scenes, there is one character that does all the talking, and another one does all the listening. And actually, the scene belongs to the guy that does the listening because he's absorbing the information. So maybe you want him to get the little close up or the push. So it's a collaborative effort, and sometimes I say, "Oh my God, this would be a great close up," but the director says, "No, no, 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 no. The scene is from that guy." Okay, sorry. So
Yeah, it's all about
it comes
perspective.
there.
Yeah. And you're also playing around with showing like multiple shots within one image. Like I'm thinking, of course, of when Henry is eating the pie and we see, you know, a shot of him and a shot of Lucky, but then also a big close-up shot of the pie, and it's all in the same image. Can you talk about why you wanted to create those kinds of images for the audience?
I you're referring to the multiple screens, no?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was something we talked and touched bases, but that is something Little Marvin decided, or the directors decided in post.
Nice.
I think it's a very good tool to multiply time, and it's a tool that was used in the 70s a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then disappeared, or not disappeared, but it's seldomly used in movies now. But it stretches time because you get 4 pieces of information of things that are happening at the same precise moment. So when we were shooting, we said, okay, let's do the close up of this, the close up of that, the close up of the pie, and let's do that shot. And then the editors would take. That wasn't decided prior, but it was always in the back of our heads. Let's get a close up of this, and let's get a cigarette in the ashtray. Let's, you know, I remember specifically there's a couple of moments where we're doing a close up. I can't remember for which episode. A close up, somebody opening the doorknob, and I'm like, wow, hold on a second. The doorknob looks great. So we did a macro shot of the doorknob with the family in the background reflected in the doorknob. That wasn't part of any scene, but it what ended up being used in episode 5. I don't know where, you know, but it's just this super cool micro shot. So I think it all comes from being on set and the improvisation that, you know, yet I said it's very mathematical when it comes to the scares, but everything else is our improvisation.
Right. Well, you're also working a lot inside the Emery house. How are you able to use that space to your advantage?
Well, the Emery House, the Emery House. Sorry to break the news to our viewers, listeners, but the Emery House is 2 houses. One is the exterior that has the front,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and then the other house it's in an interior stage. So it was a duplicate. So whenever somebody opens the door, you're inside, and the door gets open, and you are somewhere else. So we designed what we designed. The production designer designed the house in a very organic way, so you could see through the window, but not really see through the window because outside there is not the street but a backdrop. So you could see the windows were slightly higher and the camera was always lower, so you would see the sky and you wouldn't miss the neighbors going around or the cars driving. So the challenge was to, because you don't shoot in order, the challenge was to that scene, remember, did we shot it was sunny, it was cloudy, oh cloudy, okay, so you start playing with that, and you get a little bit more in embracing what looks better, you know. So you're in the house and the sun comes through the window and hits that wall behind Lucky while she's sitting there thinking. You hope for sun the day you shoot the exterior, but if there is no sun, then it doesn't matter because the audience, I think, trust the instinct of the filmmakers more than one sometimes thinks.
Right. Well, there's also 2 episodes this season called Covenant that have a very different visual look compared to the rest of the season. The first one is when we're flashing back to Lucky and what happened to her in the South, which is a really visceral episode, and it has kind of like that sepia tone look to it. But I know there's also these blood red shots at times as well. What were your discussions about how to use color and lighting in that particular episode?
It's hard to do flashbacks because you don't want to be on the nose. You don't want to make it, with vignettes or
Yeah.
whatever. But you still have to telegraph the audience a little bit that this is another moment in their life. The blood red shots were a decision made based on Little Marvin's desire of that. And we shot it, and in post, our colorist, Stefan Sonnenfeld, that it's a genius, applied this sort of blood red to the image itself. The sepia, or the more warmer tones, was a decision because we were in Southern California. We shot it there. So thankfully, we shot it after the rain, and everything was slightly green. Rain in California, as we all know, is not too frequent. So we got all those trees, and we needed to make it look like Carolina or the East Coast somewhere, North Carolina, I believe. So one of the things I used is a chocolate filter on the camera, and to enhance the greens and the blues. And by default, then by enhancing the greens and the blues, you get this sort of warm, aging tone to the material, which I think served the story a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other Covenant episode is the penultimate one where we're flashing back to like centuries ago and we're following this preacher that we've seen a little bit in the earlier episodes, and it's entirely in black and white. Another interesting look for the show. Why did that visual palette feel right for that episode?
There were conversations early on to shoot that episode in black and white. Little Marvin was convinced that it should be in black and white. The director was very happy that it should be in black and white. And the studio was hesitant because they thought it would be jarring. So I sort of took the lead on that and told Little Marvin, listen, we'll shoot it in a way that we can make a wonderful black and white project or product. But if there are hesitancies about it, black and white, we can also make a wonderful desaturated, high contrast look. There were quotes of features like the assassination of Jesse James, which is that kind of feeling. It's not black and white, but if you remember the movie, it's almost monochromatic. There's like everybody's in gray and the walls are sort of cream, and the sky, it's almost overexposed. So no, it's not black and white, but it's almost. So I sort of took the chances and shot it, thinking that would be in black and white, but with the option of going back to color. If I would have known from the get-go that yes, 100% black and white, then I would have used specialty filter to enhance the clouds and work on the wardrobe a little different to make the grays look darker or brighter. But I think then again, it was in the hands of Stefan Sonnenfeld, my colorist. We did it together, and I think it's a pretty 98% successful black and white. I won't tell you what the 2% is.
Fair enough. I understand. But we also see a number of point of view shots throughout the series that are filmed like from below. Like I think there's one where Betty is pouring milk, and then there's a scene in episode 9 actually where we're inside the hole and kind of looking from above. Do you have a favorite one of those shots, or maybe even something that's not as, outwardly obvious that you're particularly proud of from the show?
There is one shot that in episode 9, I mean, honestly, they all blur in a very proud form. But there's one shot that I think it was. The problem, the shots have to be storytelling driven. If they're not storytelling driven, then it's just a cool shot. You know, if it's a shot that it's cool and it's storytelling driven, that to me it's very important. So there is one shot that is not. It's a POV, but it's not a POV, but it's a POV. There's the preacher standing at the window in episode 9, in the black and white episode, and he looks at them. And when he looks at them, at our couple sleeping happily, he looks at them and basically, this is New Mexico. And I said, well, we need to distort. So we got some mold glass, distortion glass, you know, so for the window itself. But it wasn't distorted enough. And I said, okay, we have to make it rain. So the tears of the water will distort the image. But that had a lot of implications, because then the reverse, you have to make rain, and then, you know, the rain towers, New Mexico, mud. When do we shoot it? We shoot it. So with the help of the first AD and the producers, we arranged to make it, that scene was under the rain, you know, which in New Mexico rains and it's fine and it's okay, you know. And it made it a fantastic effect because it was a practical effect with tears of water dropping, and obviously it was like the special effect guy with a syringe in the right place dropping. And so when you see the image, it distorts in a very sort of ethereal way, but it's a scary way because all the faces are starting to be blotted because of the water. So that's probably a shot. But it's a storytelling point, you know.
Right. Well, you've done this. You did the cinematography for It Chapter 2. You did True Blood back in the day. You've worked in horror and these kinds of darker elements enough to have a sense of obviously what works and what doesn't. I remember you talked a little bit about the logistic aspect of horror. But what else would you say it is about filming horror that really distinguishes it from other genres that you've worked in, just kind of personally for you?
First of all, I'm not a horror viewer. I don't watch horror. I just don't, you know. It scares me. I'm a very sensitive person, so I don't watch it, you know. I don't know. Horror has, in horror, it's such a broad, you know, such a broad genre, you know. Horror or like drama, it's from like a soap opera shot in Venezuela to you know, an award-winning The English Patient is drama, you know.
Yeah.
So horror, I like what I do in horror because it's the lack of information. You make things darker so the audience doesn't see them. The darker it is, the better it is. And I'm not saying dark because at night, but even like the dark wall behind me, there is a bright wall, but maybe it's, you know, you have a hand coming from up here, but the hand is dark. It allows you to play with feelings and sensations visually in a very open palette. And that's what it's fun. You know, it's a lot of fun. But as I said, it's very precise, you know, so it's fun but methodical. Drama, if you have two actors sitting in a table and crying, there is very little I can do, and you hope that the actors will convey it, you know. But if they're sitting at a table and then their creature comes from behind, there is a lot I can do because you need to hide the creature and you need to make it darker and you need to make it brighter, or you need to. So there is a lot of elements that I participate in the storytelling part in horror. That is what it's, to me, it's challenging and at the same time interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And thank you so much for joining me today, Checco. I truly
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.
And
My pleasure.
yeah, for those of you watching it, like and subscribe for more Gold Derby interviews, and head to goldderby.com to make your awards season predictions.